Good morning, good afternoon. Hello, book lovers. We have a fantastic book for you. It is coming in hot, fresh off the presses, Between Two Millstones by Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn. Alexander, it's always a very important question to ask. How are we pronouncing this author's name today?
Well, good point, Robin. It has been a bit of a theme in our first few episodes. Easy first name, Aleksandr, but then Solzhenitsyn has never been considered an easy one. But I think you nailed it with the intro, so I think we're off to a good start.
Excellent. So let's just introduce what this book actually is. It covers his memoirs of exile from the Soviet Union, his first 4 years. He landed in Europe having tried to publish the Gulag Archipelago, which for Soviet Russia was a step too far. He had had an amazing decade previous to this, having gone from being a teacher in internal exile in Stalinist Russia. He very quickly had published a short novella called One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, which was not just a sensation in Russia for being the first open discussion of what life was like in the gulags, but then it was followed by a series of illegal publications of novels he'd had brewing in ages. One book on the first circle, which is all about the experience of being an intellectual in a gulag, having to deal with censorship and the strange world of layers of Stalinist bureaucracy over truth. And then he does the Cancer Ward, which reflects his own experiences as a cancer survivor. He then publishes the Gulag Archipelago, which is a massive historical work of the most information he could find about what it was like to live in the middle of Stalinist Russia, going around trying to find people, trying to collect the truth. This is step too much for the KGB. He's already run the Nobel, but they're like, you cannot be with us anymore. They rescind his citizenship, fly him into Switzerland, dump him in there, slip him a few Swiss, what are they?
Swiss francs?
Francs, and he gets off the plane to a hero's welcome to the world's media. And it's all downhill from there.
I don't think, Robin, you could come up with a better synopsis of such a rich and complex life as you just gave our listeners. That's a fantastic start.
It is a massive life, and I think one of the things to discuss about this book in particular is that we've this season of the podcast we focused on kind of books that everyone feels guilty about reading, and I think this book has a special quality to it. I had never heard of it.
Studied Russian as well, Robin.
But in your world, this is a big book. Who does Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn mean? What does he mean to you, Alex?
Well, so you're absolutely right. I think that, as someone who's been studying, Soviet history and languages from the region for a little while now, right. Solzhenitsyn's name is everywhere. You don't always read the entirety of his publications, but you read excerpts in classes. And so that's always been my experience. This one, the reason we selected this one, we'll just remind our viewers and listeners, is because I haven't read it. And it turns out, and Robin's going to share a little bit of data, no one basically on a statistical level has read this book around the world. It hasn't sold many copies, and it hasn't found its way onto the want to read lists.
Yeah, now this is us just to share some data with our listeners as well as to how the podcast is going. We now have a YouTube presence. And we now have a community. We're getting comments, Alex.
Plural. Yeah.
And we're kicking up a bit of controversy. One commentator just launched in on our analysis of the rise and fall of the Third Reich, and he just gave us this wonderful comment of what a remarkably silly conversation. And I thanked him for that. I was like, thanks. That's what we aim to do.
Feedback is a gift, Robin, and so we appreciated that, just like we appreciated the next comment. So
yeah, I was like, and thanks for the compliment. And he said, it's not a compliment. And I said, I'm still taking it as a compliment. And then he said, well, then I feel sorry for you. And so that's the kind of community that we're building right now, because in the end, the most important thing that we're trying to build is a community of people who are no longer ashamed about the pile of books on their shelves that are going unread. We truly believe that it is a natural state of the reading life to have deep relationships with books you've barely read, semi-read, and abandoned, and it's time for us to discuss it. And Alex, we got the data to show it, and I shared a little bit with you. Shall I?
Let's hear it. Yeah,
let's hear it.
And then we can speak a little bit more about how this book came to be on my shelf.
Exactly. So one of the cool things about AI right now is that you can collect vast amounts of really obscure data pretty quickly overnight while you're asleep. And another cool thing is that we have Goodreads, where people are basically saying if they want to read a book, if they've started a book, and whether they have read a book. And it's not exactly the same way of saying it, but it's a pretty good measure of what proportion of people who say they're reading this book, what's the ratio of that to people who say they've actually finished it? And you can get a pretty good metric of it, and we can pretty much say that, yes, the numbers basically show that it's very few books that everyone is finishing.
Yep. Which is something we should underline here to give us all a little bit of peace of mind. I mean, we're trying to destigmatize the act of acquiring books and not reading them, and it seems like that's sort of the mean behavior out there in the world.
Exactly. It's the normal behavior. Now, there are levels and there are qualities of unreadness.
Let's hear it. I'm ready
Let's just quickly introduce our readers to One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, short book about the Gulag. Have you read it?
I've read it.
Pretty much everyone's read it if you take a 20th century history class, and it's an overview of the 20th century. They always assign it, even if you're not studying Russian history. You're going to do one book on the First World War. That's going to be All Quiet on the Western Front. You're going to do one kind of interesting book on Nazis. That'll probably be Primo Levi's Is This a Man? Or Survivor in Auschwitz. And on the Russian side, you're going to have One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich.
100%.
What do you think of that book?
I thought it was fantastic, pretty straightforward, very, very vivid. Especially if you haven't studied the Gulag system yet, and you read this incredibly insane narrative of the life of a person who's going through it. I mean, that's pretty powerful.
I mean, so I totally think it is powerful. And I've read it twice, both for school assignments. Each time I read it, I think what is wonderful as a realistic piece of fiction is you totally buy into Ivan Denisovich's utterly miserable existence to the point where the fact that he has 3 extra pieces of bread counts as a massive happy ending. And you are left with this kind of like, hey, that was actually a pretty good day, even though what you have experienced is utter, bleak, soul-crushing horror.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that, foreshadowing a little bit, but it's something Solzhenitsyn knew on a personal level and also collected, hundreds of anecdotes from other prisoners. So he was in a good position to tell the story.
And I think that is probably the immortal work, and that is 127,000 ratings on Goodreads. People who are currently reading it right now is about 3,000.
Wow.
People who want to read it, about 100,000. We look at the ratio of like the number of people who've rated it, sort of like that. The etiquette of that is you basically finished it. So what you're looking for is a low number of current versus a high number of ratings. And at Ivan Denisovich, that's at 3%. Which pretty much means people are always finishing it. Like
That's
the people
amazing.
who are really reading it are going to finish it.
It's a page turner, as you said. It's not super long, and it's very well written.
And then the other thing about Solzhenitsyn that I think everyone should know, because it becomes pretty apparent, is that a little bit like Thomas Pynchon, is a totally misrepresentative book of the rest of him. If you start with Thomas Pynchon with The Crying of Lot 49, you go, well, here's a guy who writes really quick, easy to understand, quick books.
Very misleading when it comes to Solzhenitsyn.
Exactly. And so he has 2 gears, which is 60 pages or 9,000. And that leads us to the Gulag Archipelago. What is the Gulag Archipelago, and have you read it?
I have read it in pieces over the years. It is an incredibly detailed, incontrovertible book of evidence on the Gulag system. I think he collected some and organized some 220 narratives from former prisoners and basically uses those anecdotes, stitches them together in an incredibly compelling way to highlight the absurdity and brutality of the Gulag systems. And it's insane.
I mean, it is insane, but there's a little word that you use there, which is kind of like, it's a great store of information and facts.
Yes, it's an archive.
Which means that it suggests that there's only so much facts you can take all at once without snoozing a little bit.
I think that's fair. I think that's
it's kind of like someone talking about a bad breakup and they keep on using the word "and another thing that pisses me off is."
Yeah, that's a good comparison. I think it's you could open it to any point in the book, in any of the 3 volumes, and you would kind of find the evidence that you need that proves Solzhenitsyn's point, which is that this is an archipelago of prisons across the country, across the Soviet Union, which are brutal and systematic in nature. But the anecdotes themselves, Robin, are just so powerful. I don't know if did you peek again at the intro? Do you recall the anecdote at the intro of the Archipelago?
No, I haven't. I've never read Gulag Archipelago. It's so big, and so you see a massive book, and it says Volume 2, and I'm out. I just can't. I can't even imagine it. Where would I begin? Is the question, right?
Well, and that's a fair point. So basically, he manages to make it a pretty compelling read, at least in the beginning. So basically, there's a snippet from a nature journal, a Soviet nature journal, about how a group of explorers or scientists find a frozen space beneath a river, basically, and they find prehistoric fish that are frozen in like a pretty, like from tens of thousands of years before, in a pretty lifelike state. And they basically open up the ice and eat the fish. And the Soviet journal describes that in an exciting scientific discovery way. But Solzhenitsyn came across that snippet and realized, aha, the only reason that these that these scientists or these discoverers were so excited to eat the fish is that they were starving. And he knows this because he was also a prisoner in a gulag in a similar place in Siberia. And so that's just like such a mind-boggling way to bring you into this prison system. And it was an accidental miss from the censors to let this be published in a scientific journal. So it's just like
what a crazy image to stick into your head.
Yeah.
Like someone who is so hungry that they'll eat the scientific discovery of their lives.
Exactly. And so you could have been forgiven for reading that journal if you were like a scientist in the 50s or 60s in Western Europe. You see this journal entry. Oh my God, they tasted the prehistoric fish, but in fact, not knowing the context of what was going on, which is what Solzhenitsyn brings to light in his crazy.
It reminds me of a line, I think, by Robert Conquest, who said, like Russian propaganda is useful if you know how to read it. If they say 8 people were shot for being traitors on this thing, yes, it is true 8 people were shot. No, it's not because they were traitors for this sort of thing. Exactly. And I sort of feel like that's how Solzhenitsyn is also doing it. Like, this is what he's bringing, is like that extra thing. Now, on Gulag Archipelago, the numbers go down from 127,000 to 35,000 ratings. So we've gone down to a quarter. But for a book that long,
still
that
is
pretty impressive. And the ratio is going from 3% to 16%. So it's not bad.
Yeah.
So the fact that people at least feel like they're reading enough to rate it, that's really high.
Mm-hmm.
Then we get to Between Two Millstones, the book we're discussing today.
Robin, how does it stack up against some of the others?
Well, let's just remind ourselves of the levels here. So we're at 127,000. That's one day. Gulag Archipelago, 35,000. Between Two Millstones, 41.
41,000 or?
000. I can add some decimals if that would make you feel better.
Oh my goodness. 41. This puts us in a pretty elite group here, Robin.
Well, so much so that, in fact, 254 people say they want to read it, which is a massive number of people who are saying they want to read it and are not even picking it up. And the people who have rated it versus currently reading it goes down to 31.7%, which is your population. There are 39 other people who are in your state around the planet.
Do you think then the University of Notre Dame Press was not thrilled about the performance of this book when they took it up?
Yep. So this is obviously a book to me, and let me know sort of how you feel about it, Alexander, is that this is essentially a library book.
Yeah.
It is a book that is just meant to be bought so that everyone has got all the essential Solzhenitsyn stuff, and it's there to be brought out for a thesis. And then I also think of it as this way. It's kind of like you're really into the Beatles, and then they release a very obscure mono pressing of some album that does the Japanese vinyl.
Yeah.
And if you want to let people know how much you love the Beatles, you rush out and you buy the vinyl. It delights you, and it just sits there on your shelf.
Yeah.
I think it's something like that. But Alex, how did this book find its way onto your shelf?
No, I completely agree. Just to add one thing, I think, if you want to know the other side of the conversation, so A British author says he met Solzhenitsyn on July 17th, 1977, and you want to know what Solzhenitsyn says about it, this is going to be your resource. So yeah, not a common ask. I got it in 2018. I went back to my Amazon records and placed an order. My mom for my birthday said, buy any book you want, and it's on me. So she does that.
So this is a birthday book.
This is a
from your
birthday
mother, and it's self-selected. So put us in your shoes. Were you skipping down the lane with your golden ticket, being like, this
finally,
is awesome.
Finally, I think I had it on my list from seeing it in the back of Foreign Affairs. You know how Foreign Affairs does these little micro book reviews at the end? I think I jotted it down and just bought it, and not thinking that it would be such a deep cut.
I guess the other thing that it's like, perhaps, is the Beach Boys, recorded basically the best album of all time, and then they kicked out Brian Wilson, which meant that he could never complete his vision.
Exactly.
And so they released bits of it, but for 20 years, the Smile album was never released according to his vision. And then finally, at the grand old age of 65, he was like, okay, I'm going to re-record the Smile album roughly the way that I would have sort of done it. You bet I ordered that on Amazon back in the CD era as fast as I could.
Exactly. So that's an extremely niche example, Robin, and I really like it. And I think that's what happened in 2018 when I had heard that the first volume had been published of Solzhenitsyn's memoir. And on the surface, it seems like something that could be a page turner. And if you pick out bits and pieces of it, it is quite interesting. But when you get into I made it only about 20, 30 pages in, you realize this is a level of detail about his life in exile that is just not really necessary to have. You have to prioritize things you're going to read, and this just didn't make the cut at the end of the day.
What did you say to your mother as a thank you?
I think she knows about my book accumulation habits, and so she's seen a number of these come through her queue, and she's happy that I'm buying things that I am interested in. So.
I mean, I think if you're going to have a son with an addictive problem, it's much better that it's obscure Russian history books than.
And I think by the time I ordered it on Amazon, it was already on a deep discount. So I think it was far cheaper than she thought it was going to be.
So that's it. And let's just actually get into the book a little bit just to describe it to people. This book begins in 1974, ends in 1978. It's actually a sequence of memoirs that he's done. So just to put that in context, he has The Oak and the Calf. Again, really obscure title. Got no idea what an oak is. Got no idea what a calf is. Do you know? I'm guessing, I don't know.
I actually don't know what he's referring to there. The oak it's a pretty, important tree and word dup in Russian, but I'm not sure exactly what he's referring to. I should have read into that a little bit more first.
Invisible Allies is him kind of describing what it was like to become a literary sensation. And the invisible allies are the people who kind of help him get out of Russia. And to his surprise, he discovers that, oh my goodness, I'm so famous outside of Russia. Oh my goodness, someone has just published this novel without my permission. One enormous WTF. What do you mean I just won the Nobel?
Right.
What is going on here?
Yeah, that would have been completely crazy. Probably just getting his getting A Day in the Life published in 1962 was probably shocking, even though it was a few years after Stalin's death.
Yeah, I mean, and this is it, is that he does have a pretty amazing life. And I'm doing very poorly here because one other thing I didn't know about him is that he was a very sincere, true believer in communism, absolute hero of the Red Army, and just got caught out by doing a few comments about Stalin, being the whiskered one or something like that. Exactly. So just his Red Army experiences could be a novel. Just his Gulag experiences could be the novel. Because he's a smart guy, he's put in this Shamshara, so that could be a novel, and it is a novel. And so his memoirs are full of material. And then Between Two Millstones, 74, 78, I think actually the opening paragraph is a really good scene setter. And I think to my surprise, I think he writes it very novelistically. Do you actually want to read it yourself?
In a whirlwind of just a few hours, I was transported from Moscow's Lefortovo prison and from the whole great Soviet prison itself to Heinrich Boll's country house near Cologne, into a dense crowd of over 100 reporters waiting for my thundering pronouncements. But to my own surprise, I told them, I said enough in the Soviet Union. I will be silent for now.
I mean, that's pretty amazing, right?
That is amazing. It does set the scene, and I mean, you did allude to it earlier. His career is basically incognito, and published via other folks or samizdat, self-published informally. And then when he gets to the West, he sort of has the microphone, and people aren't always excited by what he has to say.
Yeah, and I look, I work in communication, so I think about these things kind of a lot. And I think one of the big problems is that he really sees the Western media as asking him questions he couldn't possibly answer, honestly.
And he is plagued by this incredible need to be sincere and
Yeah.
honest and tell the entire truth. And that serves him so well in his, the first 20 years of his exposés and his fiction. But then when it comes to commenting on, whether it's Western Europe or the West more broadly or the United States in particular, he's too honest, and people don't always like what they hear.
And the other thing that you get in his memoirs is that the barrage is overwhelming and endless to him. He is always being invited to comment. And right from the start, this is the theme. And I just want to carry on from a little bit, because he's got off this plane. The first thing he meets is all these journalists. And he says, what kind of statement were they expecting from me? I simply couldn't understand. Was some inane comment all they needed for a headline? That I was feeling extremely tired, or on the contrary, extremely lively? That I was absolutely delighted to be in the free world? Or that I really liked the German autobahns? If I said any of this, their long journeys would have been justified. But having just emerged from a great tumult, I was simply unable to humor them, even had I known how. My silence turned out to be a great disappointment to them. And that is what he is going to be playing with for the rest of the memoirs. He knows what they want. He's wise enough to basically be like, Switzerland is so sunny, or the Autobahn is so fascinating. I feel like the happiest man in the world. And he also knows that just saying, man, what a plane ride I've just had. I'm so exhausted. I've just got to go and relax would be enough. And instead, like you say, he can't even just do this basic etiquette for the system, and gives them what they don't want. I sometimes wonder, if it's just pure PTSD from being interrogated by KGB people.
Yeah.
All his life.
I also think we can't, overstate how different it would be to be in this media circus, compared to being basically incarcerated or in various versions of that for a long, long time in the Soviet Union before he came to the West. So he's going from, person who is not, able to live a remotely normal life in the Soviet Union, and then he's basically a celebrity. So
that's
transition would be wild. And there was no media, environment remotely comparable in the Soviet Union. Anyway.
And this is something, it must be a world where you're having to formulate a lot of your ideas in isolation. Because sharing, I have the luxury of sharing ideas with you. I encourage my clients to get ideas out as quickly as possible into podcasts, just to test them, just to see if they fly. But I'm imagining it would be a totally weird bisected life where you're teaching in the day. Even if you're an accredited writer, you can never have an honest conversation. This is what would have his life been like in his circle in that time.
I think you said it very well. I think, tiptoeing. I mean, none of the things he was working on in a more critical context would have been permitted. So he knew that all sorts of, code switching and, kitchen table conversations about things that they actually believed versus the things that they were able to say in public. So, I mean, it's tough. You don't want to overstate the environment, because there were ebbs and flows throughout his life in the Soviet Union. I mean, I think the late 30s and 40s were extremely, oppressive, and there was very little, if any, contrary opinion permitted in the public square. I think when Stalin dies in the early 50s, it does open up a little bit. After Khrushchev's speech in 57, there's more space. His novel's published in 62. Definitely couldn't have happened, while Stalin was alive. So he saw a little bit of opening in the course of his time, as did the other dissidents, but you still weren't able to even, get close to criticizing some of the core tenets, which I think probably contributed to his free-willing criticisms of the West when he leaves the Soviet Union. He's sort of, even though he wouldn't come out and say it, because he's often in critical mode when he's speaking about the context he's living in, specifically in the U.S., as you see in the Harvard speech in the 70s. But he's really embracing his freedom of speech and not really thinking too much about the consequences as he does it.
He doesn't think about it. He's not playing a communications game. And let's just zip through the events of his life after this and just show sort of what a weird figure he became. So 1974, he arrives in Europe. Pretty soon he decides that Western Europe is not going to be too much for him. It's too complicated, too difficult. He is hanging out with a bunch of people. He does love Switzerland, and he loves the Swiss cantons, which kind of like is his model for like, this is what Russian democracy used to be like or could be like. He's conservative in the sense that it should be local, it should be communal. I'm just parking that there because a little while later, he's not going to be such a big fan of American democracy.
And just to add in there, that is a really common theme in sort of Russian or Soviet studies. This notion of sort of like what is the, and this came up in our last book. What is the natural course of this civilization, this society? And Solzhenitsyn talks about the Zemstva, like this local entity, basically at the town level, to prove. And this is a common debate. Is this proof that Russia could have a vibrant democracy at some point?
Because we had a bit of a fight. I was like, show me Russian democracy. You got a bit offended. And then not unlike Solzhenitsyn gets.
Exactly.
Because he arrives in America. He decides he's going to live in Vermont, which is great taste. If you just want to be secluded in the woods, you could do. So he decides that he's got a chance to go to America. He decides Vermont looks perfect. It looks isolated. I can really focus on my work. And his work is going to sort of be the prequel to the Gulag. So in many ways, the Gulag Archipelago kind of is the ending of his work. And he wants to know, but where did the Gulag begin? And so he's going to write the great Russian novel about the start of communism, the fall of the Tsar. And he's going to call it The Red Wheel. It's going to be massive, and it turns out to be absolutely massive. He studies at Stanford, which, thanks to the Hoover Institute, has all sorts of Soviet documents, I believe one of the best in the world. I don't know if you've been to the Hoover Institute as a Russianist.
I have, and it continues to be like a preeminent place to do this sort of research. In fact, one of my favorite professors from grad school just moved from the East Coast to the West Coast specifically for the Hoover Institution.
So he goes to those archives. His mind's a little bit blown because he just decides he's got to tear up the entire plan for his novel because he becomes convinced that actually October is not the most important month. It was already all lost when the first sort of bourgeois parliament let go of all control of everybody. And it was all over from then on. So he decides he's going to tear up his novel and rework that. So it's already massive. He's going to make it even more massive. He does give a speech to the AFL-CIO, one of the big amalgamated unions of America, in which he pretty much delivers the hit that everyone's expecting. We must crush the Soviet dragon. That's what everyone expects. But stuff is beginning to nag at him, which is that he is finding America to be enormously shallow. He is finding America to be enormously commercial. He is finding the people to be sort of miserable. And he is also getting frustrated with what I can only describe as Americanized Russians. And I think one of the really fascinating things about him is that, let's just do a quick sweep of 20th century Russians, just the literary ones. And you're going to put them into tiers: S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier. Okay? All the way down to F. All right. So let's just say
there might be a lot in the S category.
So let's say we do 19th century. It's all S tiers for global things. So you got like S tier Tolstoy, S tier Dostoevsky, maybe A tier Gogol, B tier Lermontov, right? But it's basically all S tier.
My S tier.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Let's bump them up. S tier.
Bump.
Pushkin, S tier.
Yeah, it's gotta be S.
It's S tier, right? Then we get to the 20th century. So, Alex, your tiering of Russian poets and novelists. Bulgakov.
S.
S. Great. Anna Akhmatova.
A.
Vladimir Nabokov.
A.
Joseph Brodsky.
You seem like Nabokov should be an S. Yeah. Brodsky. I'm going to go with A, but this shows my own preferences for.
No, but this is the whole point.
Yeah.
And then where do we put Solzhenitsyn?
I put him in the A category. He's not like, revolutionary.
Wow. So Bulgakov and Anna Akhmatova are your S tier.
Yeah, I think.
And what about Pasternak?
A.
Yeah. Now, one little observation there is that your A tier is filled with sort of, well, you've got Nabokov, who's sort of very comfortable being American, very comfortable being a professor, very comfortable writing in English. You got Brodsky, who, yes, he writes in Russian, but very comfortable having his novels translated into English, his poems translated in English. Total New York Review of Books contributor, always hanging around a university giving lectures. Really, really loving New York. And it is quite fun, actually, just to type in names into Between Two Millstones and see what Solzhenitsyn thinks of them. And you have put Nabokov on an A tier. Solzhenitsyn puts him on an, I would say, S tier. He's like, when I was a dissident and had no way of contacting the West, is that I demanded that my publish forward a letter to say that he should be nominated for the Nobel Prize as the most revolutionary Russian writer we have ever had.
But I always find that sort of thing so kind of inspiring and interesting, because to prioritize that sort of communication above all others is fascinating. You know.
He's really a big believer, but, and this is rather good, he goes to Montreux when he's in Switzerland. Nabokov staying in this grand hotel, living off the royalties from Lolita. It doesn't quite work out. And in his memoir, I sort of bizarrely just love this paragraph. When I arrived in Switzerland, Nabokov has sent me a friendly letter and wrote with sincerity, "How good it is that your children will go to a school that is not under the yoke." But with my wound of exile still smarting, I found his words jarring. I also replied with sincerity. I don't know he knows any other way to reply.
No.
What joy can there be in this? If most of the children who have remained must go to a school that is under the yoke. Had we met in Montreux, our dialogue would in all likelihood have proceeded along those lines.
Yeah.
The riverbed of our life deepens with passing years, while the possibility for us to change, to break into another stream, lessens. In his chosen path, Nabokov had become ossified, but then I am becoming ossified too, to be able to break out into a different stream. But that is quite unlikely. I just think that's great writing.
It is great writing. It's quite contemplative. Yeah, and as you say, demonstrates his sincerity and his stubbornness.
And what he can't understand about Nabokov is why he started writing in English. Why did he stop writing about Russia? And for him, he's a genuine exile. He truly believes Russia is a great place. He thinks Russia is the best, effectively. And he doesn't think America is the best. And he doesn't want to go around saying America is so much better than Russia in every single way.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be that kind of spokesperson.
And interview after interview, shockingly, it doesn't go down well with the Western media.
Yeah, and I do think, this is, you'd mentioned sort of the Donald Rumsfelds of the world finding, Solzhenitsyn generally, but the Between Two Millstones specifically important. It's sort of they see his voice as being an important, like not necessarily the memoir, but the role that he played in the 60s and 70s as being historically valuable, like leaving aside the contents of or the style of his writing. He was a historically important person, and I think when they probably would have, that class of political and military elites would have preferred that Solzhenitsyn showed up and said, "Thank God for America." Thank God that this sort of system exists as a counterpoint to the evil empire. And he never abided.
Yeah, and I shared that Rumsfeld quote because I was looking at the blurbs on the front of the edition, and these are the most promotional things that you're going to get, right?
Yeah.
I'd say 90% are written by academics.
Yeah.
The one that they put at the top is the only person of these academics who goes, "This man's a great writer that no one actually appreciates about him." 100% of everyone else is being like, this fills in an important blank in our understanding of this really important writer who achieved so much.
But you're neglecting my favorite blurb, which is Senator Patrick Leahy of Vermont.
I loved it as well. It's at the very end, right? Read it out. It is so nice. It is so
Solzhenitsyn
nice.
took to Vermont and Vermonters took to him. I felt it a privilege to have met with him in his new Vermont setting, and I know that our state's forested beauty reminded him of home. We are proud that he believed that his homeland and the world could learn from the local self-government that is embodied in town meeting day in towns and hamlets across the Green Mountain State. The blurb is as much about Vermont as it is about Solzhenitsyn, which is great politician behavior.
And you'll notice he didn't say this is a great read.
He did not say pick this up as soon as you can. And
he's like, I couldn't put it down. From the moment I read it in one sitting on a rainy afternoon, it was so much fun, and there's so much interesting things I learned about America from it.
I can't wait to see volume 2. Yeah.
Donald Rumsfeld just said essentially just says he beat communism. He was right.
Yeah,
and
exactly. That's it. His courage, his persistence, his persuasiveness helped bring down communism. There we go. Literally.
Now, the structure of the book then basically leads up to one big climax where he decides to give the Harvard commencement address. And he feels a little bit under pressure because the KGB is doing all sorts of operations against him. They are deliberately trying to attack the Gulag Archipelago any way they can. And he's beginning to find that people are beginning to, especially in the kind of lefty media, are beginning to get the idea that he's very anti-Semitic, which he insists that he is not. But then what anti-Semite says that they're anti-Semitic in those days. But also, he has come to the conclusion that he is between two millstones. One millstone that is weighing down on him is the communist system that is keeping his beloved Russia, away from achieving its true, wonderful, local, democratic beauty. The other millstone is the shallow West that is keeping asking him the wrong questions, that are not asking about the profound stuff he is discovering, his profound thoughts. And so he goes to Harvard and delivers this address, which goes down like a cold bowl of vomit.
And I think it really helped that it was delivered via a translator. So an hour of criticism and talk about civilizational differences, delivered in the original Russian, outdoors, with a translator screaming over the intercom.
Yeah, but Alex, come on. Don't tell me you just don't wish you were in the class of 78.
Well,
with
course.
Exactly that happen.
Of course.
How pumped, how boring are most commencement addresses these days? It's like a real formula. It's always going to boil down to, hey, you'll make mistakes in the end. You will, be afraid, but whatever you do, pursue your dreams in this age of AI and uncertainty. I also learned some valuable lessons that I want to share with you. Go on, stay hungry, stay foolish, rousing ovation.
Yeah.
And instead, he just lays out his entire thesis as to the state of the world in Russia.
Yeah, exactly. It would have been, a great speech to hear as a hungover fresh grad. There's no doubt about it.
Do you know who else gave a speech? The same thing was
I do not.
The president of Botswana was also there. It was quite.
Yeah, no one remembers that. No one talks about that speech.
Solzhenitsyn meets him, and kind of in a way that you sort of suspect is probably how he felt about him. He doesn't make too many comments about the leader of Botswana, other than his skin was so black it was almost purple, and that he looked very tired. So I think that kind of reveals some of his interest and the way he sees people a little bit right there. So do you remember that? Should we discuss the Harvard address? Should we go into what it is and why it sort of basically sealed his reputation?
Yeah, get us started if you don't mind.
Yeah. So it's hard to summarize it very quickly, which is what he complains of. But essentially, his argument is this. He starts actually with what is widely accepted idea, which is that, hey, we don't live in a unified world. There are so many different cultures out there. There's China, there's Japan, there's Africa, there's Europe, there's America. Look, I don't know much about China, and I don't know much about Japan, but I do know Russia, and I know that Russia is a very, very special place.
And everyone says...
And everyone thinks, oh, he's going to go up against, Russia now. And he goes, but that doesn't mean that it should become more Western. And let me tell you why not. Because West has basically gone on a very, very wrong path. And since I've come here, I can't believe how bad it is. I came here expecting a lot of greatness. Now, what are his complaints? I don't want to misrepresent him, but it's very tough to sort of exactly represent him. But his essential point is this. I had heard this point from a teacher at a business school that is most of the institution and is founded by Opus Dei. So you encounter a lot of Catholic thinkers, right? In a crisis comms class I was teaching, my fellow professor was made this very good point, which is that law is just minimum viable ethics. if you're a company and you go out in public and say, we obeyed the law, well, so what? That's what everyone does. It's the weakest thing you can say in a crisis. It's like, congratulations on not being a criminal.
We comply with all applicable regulation.
We apply with all applicable regulations. That's like me saying I'm a great person because I never robbed a house.
Which is not untrue. I mean...
Well, it means that I'm not a bad person.
There we go.
But if you were to say that, if you were trying to convince a girlfriend that she should stick with you, and you go, I've never polluted. My pollution limits have always been within the limits of the EPA. She's going to be like, that's not good enough for me,
That's not
Alex.
good enough. I'm looking for a real special entity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And so obeying regulations is not enough for him, but he is pretty much convinced that the West, that's all the West has got left.
Legalism. It's sort of this rote
Yeah.
legalism is sort of what I was taking away from it. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think one of the counter arguments that I would guess most Americans would say, well, what you're interpreting as legalism is actually sort of a written constitution, it's ideas, it's something that everyone can agree to and everyone can plug in and out to on equal terms. You know, his point is it would be a disaster if Russia became like the West.
Yeah.
Which is really bad. And he goes, then he says a bizarre sentence that I'm going to misquote, but that's fine because everyone else misquoted it. Buried in there, he says something along the lines of, you know, and it's really important that I tell you this because probably you're going to be the people who are going to be fighting the Third World War. And it's important you understand this about Russia.
Yeah,
that's the future leaders of America.
You know, and then the audience, the applause is really at this point dying out.
Well, he does say something kind of funny in his memoir where he goes, he doesn't understand the crowd noises.
Funny.
So he's like, there's a lot of whistling, which I didn't realize was signs of approval because in Mother Russia, that would be a sign of disapproval.
Yeah.
And then he does get the applause. That's the same. And then he does say he gets a lot of which I think is great.
You know, it is like such a fascinating amalgam of ideas. I think he brings the audience back when he says, but just to be clear, I'm not saying that socialism was the right way, you know, for Russia or the Soviet Union. But until then, I think people must have been, even this erudite audience would have probably been wondering like what exactly they're there for. Because it's also about an hour long, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I mean, not unlike this podcast. So we'd better wrap it up for our listeners. So he basically closes on that address, and he closes it out with, you know, him basically quoting all the people who have incorrectly quoted him. Some people said, oh my God, he wants détente with Russia because he loves Russia so much. I wasn't arguing for that. Other people are accusing him of saying, I want to go to Russia or with Russia. I wasn't saying that. People are coming in saying, this is so annoying that he's our guest and then he should just love America. And he's like, well, I'm sorry. And this is your point, which he says very well. He's like, you loved me when I was being an advocate for free expression in the Soviet Union. I thought I could do the same in America, but I guess I can't.
And he's not wrong. I mean, you're still in the middle of the Cold War. People want there to be two clear sides, more or less, and he's complicating the binary, and people aren't ready for that type of nuance.
And then having done this, he's like, so what do? I must retreat back into silence. I'm going to solve Russia. The only thing I can do to solve this situation is stop giving interviews, write my great novel. I'm going to do the Red Wheel. That's going to go on to part 2 of the memoirs, which you haven't even bought. I think that probably the KGB were knowingly taking books that were not published in any other language than Russian and tipping off journalists to anti-Semitic passages that were not even there, that didn't exist. And sort of Solzhenitsyn makes this point. I wouldn't know, but from what he says, he's like, they were just totally misquoting my book. They clearly never read it. And I think there was a bit of agitprop there.
I think you're
against him from the KGB.
I think you're right.
And then it ends with, you know, he doesn't think the Berlin Wall is a big deal, but he panics because there's the coup of, I think, 92, 93. I can't remember the exact year.
Yeah, with the hardliners against Yeltsin.
Yeah, and then Yeltsin stands up and it all goes well. And then he's in a panic because he's like, oh my God, not enough people are reading The Red Wheel, where they're going to do exactly what I feared, which is they're going to let in pure anarchy. And if only people would read The Red Wheel, they see the last thing you need to do is just unleash anarchy on a Western legalist system. Yeltsin came in. He let in complete anarchy.
Oh, the
Local
90s.
democracy was not served. No one learned Solzhenitsyn's stuff. He comes back in 94 and he goes, yep, no one listened to me. This is terrifying. I predict that Russia is going to go through another cycle of this because no one really put in what I said should be, which is like fundamental, strong local democratic structures based off. But just to take a spin to close this out, he's a tier novelist for you. What was his reputation in Russian circles? He was in America when you were in America. You could have gone to Vermont and met him, and yet no one crossed paths with him. What was his reputation?
No, and I think you apply a very important point. I think the focus in academia, of course, there was a critical study of his role, and I think he would have appreciated this. There was actually an examination of the things he was saying about the United States and the Soviet Union. We talked about this in class in undergrad and grad school.
So how was that discussion? Where were you on that discussion? What was bright young Alex?
He needs to get in line. He needs to support the country that welcomed him. Come on, it's a
Really?
no-brainer. No, of course not. I think there's nothing more exhilarating, and there's no stronger point to be made in a geopolitical fight to allow, dissidents to criticize the government itself. I think, if he had been, embraced in a more holistic way, people would have acknowledged that. But I do think we were definitely focused in school on his earlier work. I mean,
do you think he was treated unfairly? I mean, it is striking that his works were not translated into English after that Harvard address. He basically went silent in English. From then on, he was cancelled.
I would say he was treated unfairly. But to be fair, it seems he was a very, very difficult person to engage with. I think if you'd invited him to Barnes and Noble to give a book talk about the Red Wheel, he would have spoken for 4 hours, and he would have offended everyone in the audience. So
he'd have also said that the Barnes and Noble represents everything that's wrong with selling literature today. He's so disappointed.
Exactly.
He would have laid into the local bookstore member for being so shallow and for putting this book next to some ghastly Jackie Collins novel, which is exactly what's awful about American culture.
Exactly. So I think he wasn't able to really turn a blind eye to lesser things. I think he found it to be his role to kind of criticize everything that was wrong. So I think that made him a difficult house guest in some ways. I imagine that's how he felt until the end of his life.
Yeah, and I think the other sort of like concluding thing is that dipping in and out of this book, it's terrible as a book, honestly, but it would be great as a Substack that was delivered every week.
Yeah.
If he wrote this every week and you get the paragraphs like I did about you get a river and it deepens, Nabokov's gone in this direction, I've gone in the other. If I had it in
chunks, maybe
1,000-word chunks, sorry, no. I mean, which would always be, I didn't think he could write anything less than that.
Yeah.
But that would be about right. And I would love to read him responding to his critics live on his Substack about how he's being cancelled. I'd probably even drop like $25 just to get like the Patreon rants and the podcast of him responding to it, because he is a little bit like Jordan Peterson or someone like Andrew Sullivan, one of these really idiosyncratic conservative thinkers who is allies to sort of basically nobody. And if Rumsfeld had a conversation with him for 20 minutes, I'm sure Rumsfeld would lose his shit.
Yeah.
And Patrick Leahy, you got to love him, because I'm sure he just sat there being like, so what else do you like about Vermont?
Exactly. Yeah. Which other aspects of local government do you find relevant?
And because he's a real politician, and probably is like, did you like my book?
Yeah.
And then Leahy's sort of like, I'm sure it's a very important book, but let's what parts of it remind you of Russia?
Exactly. But I agree. I think he would have been, Solzhenitsyn died in 2008. I think he would have really appreciated Substack if it had been around. But Blogspot, was there.
He could have set up a blog.
That's
true.
Angel Fire,
He died in 2008. Are you putting this on your bookshelf? Where is it going?
It's going right into the, it's going right beside the Stephen Kotkin biography of Stalin. I mean, there's no better place.
Excellent. I have this book in my hand. Where am I going to impress people? Where is this unread book going to actually help me? In what environment?
The first thing that came to my mind is the train to Vienna. I don't know exactly why, but I just think, you're bound to run into a modern day dissident from some territory, and it's going to just be a great conversation starter.
So that's my before sunrise, because they're on the train to Vienna. He's reading a book. She goes, oh, you're reading that. So the Julie Delpy of Russian dissident and stuff is going to strike up a conversation.
And someone might think it's, Between Two Ferns, Zach Galifianakis. In either case, it's going to be a great conversation.
That happened to me when I was reading Tom Jones by Henry Fielding in New York, and everyone thought I was reading a biography of the Welsh singer.
What? Exactly. Either way, it's going to be great.
It's a good, you're absolutely right. It was like either they're a fan of Henry Fielding, great, or they loved Tom Jones, also great. It's a great group to be in the middle of. Final, most important question. Well, second most important final question, penultimate and important question. Are you finishing this book?
I'm definitely not going to finish this book. I've really truthfully enjoyed this conversation, and you've reminded me of a lot of really important things about Solzhenitsyn, and you've taught me many things as well that I never knew. But I don't think I need to spend time with this book. I do intend to buy, you're going to laugh, The Red Wheel.
Yeah.
I'm going to work my way through its component parts.
The first one, the thing is that the titles are so boring. It's all just dates. It's like August 1916.
I think August 1914 is the first.
That's the one that he wrote after he went to Stanford, and he's like, no, this is the new beginning of my novel.
Yeah, so I'm excited. I'm gonna immediately look for an affordable copy.
If there's one motto of this podcast, it's buy it.
Buy first, think later.
It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
There we go. Can you imagine being on the train to Vienna and not having the Red Wheel?
If you meet someone who basically says, which is your favorite volume of the Red Wheel? You have met, out of those 40 people who are booking this thing on Goodreads, you have found your mirror. You are going to be in contact with that person for the rest of your life until they go, but let me give you another crazy opinion about Bitcoin, because where Solzhenitsyn was right.
Unfortunately, the Venn diagram is problematic there, and it might be hard to find someone who likes the Red Wheel who isn't also a conspiracy theorist.
Okay, and then it's on to the next episode.
So
Alex?
Robin, so I've surveyed the list of books that you haven't read, at least the list you've provided me with. And
by the way, you're being increasingly mean about.
No, this is listeners, this is an amazing list of books. We're going to go with Miss Dalloway by Virginia Woolf.
Excellent choice.
We have also gotten some feedback from our listeners that the themes have been pretty heavy right out of the gate and all kind of in the nonfiction category. So we're going to mix it up, and we're going to see what folks like about it or don't.
Excellent. Looking so forward to it. Alex, what books have you picked up, just quickly, since we
Yeah, speaking of niche, where did that book go? I bought a book from the newly named Nobel Prize winning author from Hungary, which is called
A Mountain to the North.
Exactly.
A lake to the south, paths to the west, a river to the east.
And I'm pretty confident I'll read vanishingly a few pages.
But that's the opening of a 1980s text video game.
Yeah, it's insane. And I read an interview with him in the New Yorker like a week ago. It's a new interview, and he's a completely fascinating and insane person. I love it. I can't wait to check it out.
And you completed?
I completed Long Live the Post Horn, which was awesome. I told people about it last time. It was really, really good, and I couldn't recommend it any more highly. It was inspiring. It was bringing life to the mundane. I think it's going to be great.
And then on my end, that segue into it. I saw there was a sale on Verso Books.
No, Robin.
Farewell to whatever something Post Horn was there for just €4 for the digital edition.
That's great.
How could I say no?
Robin, it's about a PR consultant.
It's about the mail. It's about the post.
And it opens with a beautiful quote from Kierkegaard, which, if that doesn't pull you in, nothing will.
And I finished a book about George Sand called Becoming George, which I strongly recommend.
Okay.
If you are interested in what it is to decide to dress like a man when you are a woman in the 1850s, as you become one of the all-time best-selling authors while being incredibly sexually promiscuous, while sleeping with Frédéric Chopin, while probably only having one lesbian affair in your life, but just attracting all of these men while very deliberately dressing as being the only person in Paris dressed as a man. If you want to know how you make those decisions, how you become a great writer, this is the book to read. It is fantastic.
Robin, some portion of those questions have been on my mind. I won't tell the listeners which ones, but it sounds like something I should also pick up.
You can also buy it as a course on YouTube on my Patreon for 10 courses. And you can also do it that way if you want to spend a little bit more money and get personal touch on your journey to following these 9 simple steps.
I think I need to start with the book, and then if I love it as much as you did, I'll do the course.
Yeah. Awesome, man. This is great. Mrs. Dalloway, next, everyone. Sponsors, listen, time is running out. We're getting a lot of heels. We don't want to betray our values, though. So we had to say no to Amazon. We have a pretty narrow band of topics and businesses that we're willing to stump for, but they do exist. So please don't hesitate to reach out. You might find you're in luck. Alex, thanks for staying with me for what was an overly long conversation. Thanks, listeners, for sticking along for this long with us. Hopefully you know more about Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn than you did, and the chances are very high. One thing we can say, Alex, is the chances are almost certain that you know more about Between Two Millstones than you did before, unless you are one of 500 people in our nation in our planet of 8 billion people. Beautiful end, Robin. Good night and good luck. Bye. Bye.